Welcome everyone to today's Explainer. We're stepping back in time today to explore one of the absolute darkest, most terrifying chapters in all of human history, the devastating sweep of the Black Death across Europe. Okay, let's dive into this. Picture this. You're in a medieval European city at night. The streets are completely empty. There's this incredibly thick, rolling fog that's just totally obscuring the cobblestones beneath your feet. And all you can hear is the solitary, chilling sound of church bells ringing out into the pitch black. You can almost feel the cold dampness in the air, right? And that creeping, undeniable sense of dread.
That brings us to our first section, the silent arrival. The plague didn't announce itself with some massive invading army. It started quietly. Ships arrived at European ports on day one, bringing vital trade, sure, but also a hidden, deadly cargo. Within just a couple of weeks, the real vectors, the rats, were scurrying through these dark, winding alleyways, spreading the disease completely unseen. It was a literal, invisible invasion. But then, by the first month, the terrifying reality just suddenly hit. That eerie silence broke when frightened citizens watched sick villagers literally collapse right in the middle of crowded streets.
Which leads us to our next section, the face of the plague.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the haunting symbol that emerged from the crisis, the plague doctor. These medical figures would walk through the narrow, infected streets wearing those iconic, frankly terrifying masks. And while the mask was supposed to protect the doctor, to the villagers, it became the very face of the disease itself. Imagine looking out your window into the fog and seeing that grim figure slowly walking toward your front door. No way, right? But honestly, the true horror wasn't just out there on the cobblestones, it was hidden away inside these small, candlelit homes. First, you had the physical onset, these terrifying, swollen black plague marks appearing out of nowhere. And then came the profound emotional toll, relatives crying helplessly right beside their sick loved ones in the flickering candlelight, eventually just having to watch them succumb to the disease. The emotional weight inside those intimate, dark rooms was absolutely devastating.
And that intense personal tragedy fueled our next section, societal collapse and panic.
And this brilliantly illustrates the sheer scale of the horror, because medieval institutions just completely broke down. Dead bodies were filling the streets way faster than anyone could move them. People were frantically digging mass graves just outside the city walls. Meanwhile, the dark medieval hospitals became horribly overcrowded with desperate victims. And maybe the most terrifying part of the whole shebang? The medical establishment completely failed. Doctors were entirely unable to stop this unstoppable biological force. They were totally in the dark.
This extreme societal collapse really pulled people in two entirely opposite directions. On one hand, you had these packed, dark churches just completely filled with terrified people crowding together, desperately praying for survival against this unseen killer. But then, on the other hand, you had the exact opposite scenario. Entire villages sitting totally abandoned, completely silent, lifeless, and swallowed by fog. It perfectly captures human desperation, You either seek salvation in crowds or you flee society altogether.
And for those who chose to run, well, the panic spread like wildfire. Citizens fled the cities in absolute droves. Families ran blindly, literally carrying whatever children and meager supplies they could grab. It was just frantic, disorganized survival. And this panic ultimately culminated in massive cemeteries, filled with the dramatic tension of burning torches and grieving survivors who were just desperate to bury their dead. Chaos completely overtook order.
So the crucial point is that this wasn't just a series of isolated local outbreaks. All of Europe fell entirely into profound chaos and fear. An entire continent's infrastructure, its faith, its day-to-day life, all of it was completely ruined under the heavy, inescapable shadow of the plague.
Let's move to our final section and see how this builds. Emerging from the ashes.
After years, literally years, of relentless death and unimaginable destruction, the long night finally broke. Survivors slowly started to emerge, stepping out into empty, ruined cities just as the sun rose. It must have been such a solemn, hollow dawn. The dark terror of the plague years finally gave way to a harsh, quiet sunrise that illuminated a drastically changed, nearly empty world. The quiet resilience of the few who actually remained is just profound.
It was a haunting end to a truly catastrophic era, and it leaves us with one incredibly provocative question. When the fog of the Great Mortality finally cleared, what kind of world was actually left behind? Think about the monumental shifts in society, the economy, and even human psychology that had to follow such a devastating collapse. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll leave you to ponder that thought.